Welcome to the Legends series. Each month on the Rent to Rent Success podcast, we are talking to property legends with an area of expertise that will help us to grow ourselves and our businesses. And immediately after we do this recording live, we have a special private presentation and Q&A that's exclusively for our Rent to Rent superstars. So watch out if that is you. So this month's Legend series features private finance legend Ayesha Ofori. Ayesha is an incredible woman, and if you missed the Property Game Changers interview that we did with her, you definitely want to go back and find that interview to check her out. I think you'll be as blown away as I am by all that Ayesha has achieved. It's one of the episodes that I've received the most messages about from people who were totally inspired and blown away by her story. So briefly, Ayesha has managed £500 million as an ultra high net worth advisor at Goldman Sachs. And she's got extensive experience in raising finance rather. She's founder of the Propelle Network, a property and self-investment community for women. She's founder of the Black Property Network, which empowers Black people to build wealth through property. And she's CEO of Axiom Property Partners, which works with high net worth individuals who seek bespoke investment opportunities. Now, Ayesha has also a string of accolades to her name, including she's winner of the 2019 Women of the Future Awards, and she's one of the 15 Women of the Future that you need to know by the Telegraph newspaper. Ayesha is definitely someone who believes bigger, who is bolder, and who is a game changer. Welcome, property finance legend Ayesha Ofori. Hi, Ayesha.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is, I'm just so thrilled to have you back, because I did mention to you that we've had so much interaction, engagement with your previous interview that we did on the Property Game Changers.
Yeah, I had quite a lot of people reach out to me as well. So it's always really nice to know that, somebody can listen to your story and, feel inspired or motivated or just moved to be able to sort of do something positive in their own lives.
And that is brilliant. And so what I thought I would invite you back for, Ayesha, is one of your superpowers is that your ability to raise private finance. And not only have you done it as a layperson, but you've also done this as your professional job. So why don't we talk a little bit, just going back to Goldman's, how you got in there, and tell us a little bit about getting started working with ultra high net worth individuals.
Yeah, so I went into investment banking straight out of undergrad, so out of my first degree. I'd studied physics, so I wasn't particularly pointed in any sort of direction career-wise. I went into banking because A, I thought it was a great sort of career, something to do. B, I had student debts I needed to pay, and they paid well. But I started off in a different area of banking, and then I went to business school after the 2008 financial crisis. And my plan during business school was actually to do something completely different when I graduated, but I actually had no idea what. And, I thought I was going to go to business school for 2 years to find myself, and then I would become an entrepreneur or do something else. Ironically, I went back into banking, and that was when I joined Goldman Sachs. So that was back in I first joined them in 2011 and started full-time 2012. And I knew what roles I didn't want to do. And that was kind of my starting point, which is a little bit of a bizarre way to look for a job. But I knew that I'm not a morning person. So those sort of traders who are at their desk at sort of 5, 6 a.m., that was not going to be me. I knew I loved people. I love talking to people. I love meeting people. I love helping people. So I needed a role where I was going to be very sort of client focused. I'm a numbers geek. Excel is, something that I love to do. So I knew I also needed to do something where I'd be sort of heavily involved with the numbers. I wanted more responsibility. I wanted there to be sort of clear career progression, and I just wanted control over the work that I did. I hate being micromanaged. So I wanted control in terms of how I sort of, went through my working day. And somebody suggested wealth management to me. And initially I sort of wrote it off. I was like, absolutely not. I've seen the movies. I know what wealth management it is. Those guys that go and play golf and pretend that they work.
Yeah.
But someone said to me, stop being so stereotypical. Why don't you actually look into it? And particularly, look at a firm like Goldman, because rather than just being the relationship person, at Goldman, the role is combined. So you're the person who has to go and find the client and keep them happy, but you also manage their money. Whereas some other firms separate those two roles. So they'll be done by different people or different teams. So I quite like the idea that I would have to, manage the relationship and get to know people, but also that I'd be the one doing the number crunching and making the decisions on actually where the money went. So long story short, I, did some research on Goldman, met some of their team, thought, actually, this could be, my cup of tea. And I started by doing an internship. And the internship's quite interesting. So it's a summer program, and essentially it's like a 6-week interview. And they interview you and they decide at the end whether or not they're going to give you a full-time role. And during that time, you have to kind of prove that you can do the job. Now at Goldman, they focus on ultra high net worth individuals. So minimum account size is $10 million. And so what I had to prove during that internship was that I would be able to bring in clients and to bring in the money. So I put together this really, I guess, sort of comprehensive strategy outline as to how I was going to do this. And, at the time I was like, yeah, this is actually really good. I'd hire myself. And I, presented it. They liked it. They gave me the full-time offer, and I started the next year when I finished my MBA. So roll forward to my first day. Actually, then you have training. So they fly you to New York and they train you on various different things. Then you come back to London and it's your first day at the desk. So first day at my desk, I, log into the computer, raring to go. And I'm like, right, what do I do? I'm like, I have that, presentation, that strategy deck I made last year. So I pull that out and I open it up and I'm like, okay, right. So all I've got to do is do whatever I wrote in this thing. So I refreshed my memory on what was in it. I looked through it, and basically what I'd done is I put in all the wealthy people that I knew. I put in other people that I knew, some people I knew. So if I called somebody and said, could you introduce me to so-and-so? I think it took me about 3 or 4 hours to go through and contact all of the people in that presentation, to try and, get them to be clients. And the ones that, did pick up the phone that I could speak to were sort of like, Ayesha, we love you, but you're not a wealth advisor. This is your first day on the job. What the hell do you know about wealth management? Yes, you've been in New York for a few weeks and you've done some training, but, as much as we love you, we're not going to give you our money because you have no track record and you have no experience doing this in managing money. And I actually, sat down and I was like, oh my gosh, like they're actually right. Like I wouldn't give me money with no track record either. And then I sort of thought, well, what the hell am I going to do? These guys have hired me to bring in all this money and they give us targets. So you have a target that you have to hit within 2 years. And it equates to approximately bringing in $500 million. And then you have targets that you have to hit sort of beyond that. And the $500 million target within 2 years is a bit flexible. They'll give you between sort of 2 to 4 years to do it. And then beyond that, you've got to, then obviously scale up and bring in more and more money. So I was there sitting at the desk thinking, okay, I've been through all of my really wealthy contacts. Where the hell am I going to find people to give me $500 million that I have to bring in? And then I started to like panic a bit, you start to sweat. And then I was like, what the hell am I going to do? I probably went for a bit of a break, and then I came back and I said, you know what? They've hired me because they can see something in me and they know I can do this. When I calmed down, I said, actually, I know I can do this. I have to be strategic about it. One of the reasons I think that banks like to go to university campuses and hire scientists is because they think that our brains are quite analytical. So we're able to solve problems, usually mathematically. So the way that I looked at this was, I was like, right, I have a problem. I need to find all this money. Now there is money out there. So clearly I can see the money over there. I'm sitting over here. I just need to somehow go and get that money. So there has to be a way to do it. And I have to map out a strategy of how to go about that. And I literally sat down and, closed the old presentation, started again, and mapped out with the skill set that I have, with the, the connections that I have, how am I going to do this? And the interesting thing about my experience at Goldman is that when I moved into full-time property, finding money is pretty much the same. It's actually much easier now because I've got to find a lot less.
Yeah.
So back then I had to convince people to give me at least 10 million. When I'm speaking to people now, I mean, the sums of money we're talking about is still significant. But it's, from my perspective, it's a bit easier for me because I'm not necessarily talking about tens or hundreds of millions at once. But what's really important, I think, is that the skill set of being able to map out how to find investors, how to get them to work with you, how to get them to give you money, and how to get them to keep coming back, I actually think is something that can be learnt. And it's what oftentimes, people within my network, so Propelle Network or BPN, a lot of people get to that point where they need additional financing. Either they've had money of their own and they've run out, or they haven't had much to start with in the beginning, but they really need to get going. So it doesn't really matter who you are in property, financing or raising money is going to come up. And so you need to know how to do it. And there are definitely do's and there are definitely don'ts. I'd say the most important thing is persistence. And I say that with caution. There is a fine line between persistence and stalking or harassment.
Yeah. Have you crossed that line, Ayesha?
Well, it's interesting. I remember I had a client at Goldman once. I identified that, I thought he was very wealthy, and for various reasons, I thought that he'd want to become a client. I remember getting hold of him and, sort of introducing myself, credentializing myself, saying, who I was and why he should, give me his money. And, he was very, very blunt. But by that point, I got used to people being blunt, particularly when it comes to money. And he said, I would never work with your firm. No offense to you, but for various different reasons, it's not for me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, look, why are you writing me off? Why are you writing my department off versus, whatever it is that you may have heard about something else that may or may not be true? Let's talk about it. So I got him talking. And that was the first step. And then I said to him, look, don't even make a decision now. Why don't we follow up in a few weeks? And then I followed up with him again. And in between that time, I'd sent him a few emails about things that I knew he was interested in. So he'd mentioned on the phone that he was particularly interested in golf. I knew nothing about golf at that point. I did a bit of research. I learned some stuff, spoke to friends who played golf, and I sent him some interesting things. So I just stayed at the sort of forefront, not the forefront of his mind, but I stayed near the sort of, top of his email inbox, if you like. And I just consistently kept in touch with him. Yeah. And then eventually we had another conversation and he said to me, you are persistent. Actually, I really like that, because if you're this persistent and, annoying with me, then I guess that's how persistent and you're annoying you're going to be about managing my money. And I was like, exactly. And he actually became a client. He became my best client. And he was actually a client right up to the day I left. In fact, I still talk to him now. And that was for me, that's one of the relationships I'll never forget, particularly because he told me he was never going to become a client. And you know what? I love a challenge.
Yeah, I love that. Every time you speak, there's so much comes out. But there were a few observations while you were speaking, going way back. You are a combination of people person and geek, Excel spreadsheet geek, and other kind of geek as well. But let's just choose Excel flavor right now. Yeah. Unusual.
Very, yeah. So university was interesting.
I'm not sure what to make of that. Do you mean on sort of Aaron style interesting?
No, I mean, because I studied physics, I was, one of, I think there are about 200 people on my course and 5 women. So, surrounded by a lot of men, but a lot of very smart, sort of very academic men who weren't necessarily very social.
Yeah.
So because I am quite social,
Yeah.
it was just interesting.
Do you know what? I'm not going to elaborate because you're married now as well. So I don't know which way the conversation is going. So let's move on because we've got a lot of other things to get into. Now, one of the things that really holds people back is the idea, and this is what you were facing. How do you attract investment when you have no experience? And that was
So
what you were facing on that day one, and that's what many people are facing in property. Can you come up the screen a little bit? You're
Oh yeah, sure. Can you see me?
yeah, that's better. So, how do you do that?
So what I did back then, and what I would, when I speak to people and what I suggest now is, if you don't have credibility on your own at the moment, you basically have to borrow someone else's. You have to borrow someone else's until you've got your own.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Or how did I do it back then? So initially when I started going to meetings on my own. And then I'd get that, those comments, well, you've just started. What do you know? So then I went to a guy on my team who had been there for a number of years. And I sort of said to him, well, I have an idea. How about you come to some of my meetings? If you help me get it across the line, I'll give you a little bit of my revenue. And he was like, so I just got to come. I'm like, yeah, I don't even need you to say anything. Like, it's my meeting. I want to own the relationship. I literally just need you to be there to give me some credibility. And he was like, so I come, I sit in your meeting, I do nothing, but I get paid. I was like, yeah, if it goes some way, then yeah. He's like, okay. So I leveraged his credibility and his reputation in the beginning, because he was more tenured and more experienced. And that enabled me to, build up relationships with people. They felt more comfortable knowing it wasn't just this, new lady who had just started, who'd never managed anyone else's money, and they weren't going to be my first client. So they felt more comfortable. So whilst this person was there with me, I was actually the one doing everything. But as I said, I was kind of borrowing his reputation and his credibility. That allowed me to start getting clients of my own. And then eventually you have enough clients of your own, you actually genuinely build up a reputation. And then, at some point I said to him, well, actually, I don't really need you to come to my meetings anymore. Like, no offense, I've got a track record now. I'm going to go and fly solo. And that's what I did. And, I wasn't the only person who did that. A lot of, junior people who started at the firm do similar things. And it's very similar in property. If you don't have a track record and you don't have experience, then why don't you go and find somebody that does and offer them something for it, partner with them in some way. Now, I have seen people try to do it, on their own and not that way. And I just personally think it's really difficult. It's an uphill battle. It's not impossible. You can do it yourself, starting from, with no track record. But one of the things about getting people to give you money is that they have to trust you and they have to believe that you're going to make money for them. And just generally speaking, you feel more comfortable and more confident about somebody when you know they have history and track record. It's a bit like, if you were going in for an operation and then the doctor walks in and sort of says to you, oh, I've just finished university, this is my first day, and you're going to have heart surgery. I think you're going to be a bit like, oh my goodness, where's the doctor or the surgeon who's been around for 10 years kind of thing. It's very similar. When it comes to people's personal money, it's incredibly important to them because they would have spent their time, their years, their efforts building up that money. So they have to trust you. And if you don't have experience already doing it, it's very difficult to get them over that trust hurdle. Not impossible, but it's hard. If you have or can bring on board somebody who has that experience, it makes getting over that hurdle so much easier.
Yeah, entirely agree. So we've got the first prong there, borrowing credibility, fantastic tip. And you also mentioned that people can just go with a loan. And tell us about what sort of things people could do. I'm guessing here it's working in your close network if you're going to.
So usually I'd say to start with friends and family. And the interesting thing about that is that or not for most, but for a lot of people, particularly the ones that I've met, they kind of said, well, my friends and family don't really have any money, so they're not going to be able to help. And then the next question I say is, well, have you asked them? It's like, well, no, I haven't asked, but I know they don't have any money. You do not know how much money somebody has unless you can see their bank account. And even then, you don't even know if that's all the money that they have. I've been through that personal experience myself. There was a family member who approached me and said, oh, I've seen what you've done with property for yourself. I think it's amazing. Can I invest with you? And I'll tell a story. It's my grandmother. And I actually said, oh, Gran, that's really sweet. Like, bless you. But, I don't think you quite get what I do. I don't think, when I say I need investors with like serious money, like not like, oh, here's £50 kind of thing. And she was quite taken aback and offended, and then said, oh, well, I think it was £50,000. I mean, I was like, you have £50,000? Really?
Yeah.
And I mean, you would never guess my grandma had that kind of money from the way she behaves normally. She's always bargain hunting.
Yeah.
But that just reminded me, never judge a book by its cover. You don't know how much money people have. I have a similar example from when I was working at Goldman. Another client I was having a meeting with him, and he dropped his phone on the floor. I picked it up, and it was an old iPhone, and it literally had duct tape around it.
Yeah.
And I gave it back to him, and I said, now we both know you can afford a better phone. In fact, you could probably buy a massive chunk of Apple. Why does your phone have duct tape on it? And he says, why not? I've put the duct tape on it and it works perfectly well. And he says, and besides, I don't like people to know how much wealth I have, whatever. And, judging by this guy, by the car he drove, the clothes he wore, you'd think that you'd need to give him money.
Yeah.
So you can never judge a book by its cover. So speak to family members, and you don't have to ask people for money. Just tell them what you do. So the point there is, never judge a book by its cover. You don't know who really has money and how much they have money. So I assume everyone has money. And then I guess a sort of another point on from that is, asking for money, I find, is a little bit cringy. I actually think it's just un-British. We're British, we don't ask for money. Like, how could we? So I don't actually ask people for money. I tell them what I do. I tell them how I've helped other people who've been in a situation, who's had money. And then usually what happens is, at some point they will come back and they'll say, oh, remember when you said you helped so-and-so in this way? Could you do that for me? Or could you do something slightly different for me? So that's the way I get around not asking people directly for money. But that just could be me, having a little thing where I feel uncomfortable about it. If you do feel comfortable about asking people for money in a way that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable, then I'd say go for it. But that's the way I deal with it.
That's great. So you've given some great tips there on the family and friends front. Just tell people what you do, or as I sometimes paraphrase it or heard it said, speak the language of opportunity. So you're not actually asking for anything. You're telling people about the opportunities that you have created for other people, and you're also showing them about the outcomes for those other people.
Exactly.
People love a fantastic opportunity, and the magic words as well. Do you know anyone who? Do you know anyone who would be interested in this kind of an opportunity?
Referrals are great. Usually I find that referrals are best when you've already worked with somebody, you have a happy customer, then they'll recommend everyone they can think of.
Yeah. So we've got your two, which I think are really fantastic strategies for beginners. Is there a third one that we should really know about when we're starting off?
I'd say those are sort of the two main ones of when you're sort of going direct to individuals. There are, of course, other ways to raise financing for property, such as property crowdfunding. which I'm heavily involved in. I co-own a property crowdfunding platform. So we have a lot of sort of fundraisers there who will come to us and have various different projects, and they will look for fundraising. And I guess every sort of crowdfunding platform will have different criteria about who they work with. But for us, we do look for people who have track records. But again, what we've seen sometimes is there'll be one person who has a track record and somebody else who is new. And again, I think, they've sort of partnered up.
Yeah. No, that's great. Tell us a little bit about who would be a good candidate to come and raise money with your crowdfunding platform.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of development or person are you looking for?
So it's really varied, and people always, ask, so what is the maximum size? What is the minimum? There was a deal that we're about to launch, or that was as small as £50,000. And the reason we were okay to do that was because that we know that this particular developer has several much bigger deals in the pipeline. We have done several deals recently that have been around £100,000. We're looking at deals that are, several £1,000,000. So there isn't really a sort of magic number. It's more about the team. It's more who the team is, and also about the project itself.
No, that sounds really exciting. And the other thing that I really liked about the way that you do your crowdfunding, I'm not sure how other people do theirs, but people can invest really small amounts of money and own part of the property company, if not the property. How does it, tell us a little bit about how people can start investing with you using the crowdfunding platform?
Yeah, so my crowdfund, or the crowdfunding platform that I co-own, is called Leo Crowdfunding. And as you said, Steph, we allow people to invest from as little as £100. And that was incredibly important to both me and my business partner, because historically, if you look at property investing, it's something that was reserved for the wealthy. You needed to have, considerable money or access to considerable money to be even able to participate in an investment. So democratizing property investing is something that's, a key focus of mine through, a lot of my business ventures. And crowdfunding is an absolutely incredible way to do that, because with as little as £100, somebody can invest in a project. Not only do you get to invest, but some of the projects that we run are what we call earn and learns. So you can actually learn about the project as well. From the very beginning to the very end, you get to do site visits. There'll be video updates. There'll be sessions on, understanding the numbers. How do you, build an Excel model if you were doing this particular deal, for example. But more importantly, investors actually get to go through a whole investment experience. So you get to go through reading and understanding the shareholder agreement, understanding how, these deals are set up, how, the structure works, how do you get your shareholding? What does that mean for, in terms of your return, in terms of your profit? What do other shareholders get? It really gives you a good understanding of just how to put a deal together. So I actually think it's quite a great opportunity for people who are new to property investing, because it allows you to play for £100 and you get to see so many different parts of what puts together a property deal. And the idea, I guess, for a lot of people is it's a good place to start, but in, a couple of years, it could be them on the other side of the table actually raising the money.
Yeah, no, that is super. Have I got this correct? Leo crowdfunding.
Yeah, so leocrowdfunding.com, and Leo stands for learn, earn, own.
Okay. So yeah, leocrowdfunding.com. If you want to find out more about that, maybe you want to raise for a development you're doing, or maybe you would like to invest, starting from as little as £100. So let's go on now to talk about some people you've worked with. You work with a lot of people with Propelle and with your Black Property Network and with mentoring people. So can you give us an example perhaps of somebody who had a lot of concerns about raising money for their property business and who managed to do it?
Yeah, so I guess there are two examples and they're quite different. So one is a lady who has been in property for some time, but she was doing a service accommodation strategy. And she had recently started looking at a different strategy, a development strategy. And the money required for a development strategy versus what she would typically put into her rent service accommodation is just very, very sort of different sums. And while she, really knew her sort of skill set on what she had previously been doing, the development was, completely new to her. She'd found an opportunity, which, I looked at it as well, it was great. But she just didn't know where to get the money from to sort of get it going. And, she reached out to me and she asked for some, what I thought. And I essentially went through with her exactly what I said here today. And I sort of said to her, the money is closer than you think. You need to look around you, and you need to start sharing with people and telling them what you do. If I was somebody around you, like, one of your friends and family, and you bought me this deal, I would bite your arm off, because I don't see deals like this very often. And the great thing about friends and family is that first hurdle that I spoke about trust, because they already know you, that's already gone. So then there are two other hurdles that you have to deal with. So the second one is, people have to like you. And I'm assuming if they're your friends and families, that's already done as well.
Yeah.
And then the third one is that they think that you're going to make money for them. Now, if you have a great deal and you can explain it to people in a simple way, then they should be able to see for themselves how it's going to make money for them. So what's really important is how you present your deal. So the documents that you're going to put together, the investor presentation that you're going to put together for your investors to look at, if they want to look at your deal, is going to be very, very important. One thing that I just want to caveat is, though, whenever you're raising financing from individuals for your projects, you have to be compliant. You have to do it in a regulated way. And unfortunately, a lot of people either don't know about the compliance or ignore the compliance. It's a frustration of mine because I see a lot of people doing it technically illegally, but their view is that the FCA is, too busy to bother with them and their tiny little deal that they're raising money for. So that's just one thing that I wanted to caveat there.
So what kind of things, let's just briefly touch on this compliance. What kind of things really rile you up? Let's know, Ayesha. What should we be doing?
So essentially, a lot of the property market is unregulated. So there are lots of things that you can do and no one will say anything. However, there are certain things that are regulated. So one is financial promotions. So for example, there are rules and regulations about how you can promote a particular deal. So for example, I couldn't come on here and then suddenly start talking about a deal and saying how fantastic it is and what returns are on offer. And if anyone's interested, here's my number, call me. That's not okay, because I don't know who is listening. I don't know the experience level of the people listening. Are they high net worth individuals, sophisticated investors, or what I call retail or restricted investors? And with retail and restricted investors, the FCA have a lot of guidelines around what you can show to those people, because to them, they see them as the most vulnerable. What they don't want happening is basically people investing in projects that they don't really understand. This is why the legislation is in place to protect them. So there's a lot that you can't do in terms of how you promote your deals. And also just in terms of how you structure them and put them together, particularly if they're equity investments. So if you're raising money from somebody and rather than give them a fixed return for a fixed period of time, you want to let them have profit share in your project. So it's an equity investment. You're not allowed to have multiple people going into an equity type project, because then it's classified as a collective investment scheme. And a collective investment scheme is regulated activity for which you would need FCA approval. Now, many people don't know this and don't know necessarily how it works. So I know of some people who sort of said, well, if I get high net worth individuals or sophisticated investors and I, get them to sign something to say that they're sophisticated or high net worth, then it's fine. Actually, no. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on how you give them the information about the investments. And then the more, I guess, the even more frustrating thing about this is, depending on who you ask, people will give you different opinions on exactly how it
Mm,
works.
mm,
Because unfortunately, sometimes the guidelines from the FCA aren't black and white. Sometimes it's a bit grey and open to interpretation. But my perspective is always stay as far to, you know, the right side of the line as possible. There is no point putting yourself or your project at risk.
Great. Thanks for filling us in on that. So that's a bit confusing. I see that because it can be differently interpreted. So we won't delve any further there. But I would like to ask you, did you already clarify the woman who we were just talking about who wanted to raise the funds? Did we clarify how she did it in the end?
Yeah, so what she did is she actually went to her network. So she had a network of people around her who had been investing in property, but doing sort of bigger projects. And
Mm,
so she went to one of those ladies, so who had known her for a long time, but sort of
mm.
said to her, "Look, I know you know me as, you know, a woman operating in this part of the property world. I'm now doing this. Yes, it is new for me, but you know me. But more importantly, you understand how numbers work as well. Have a look at this deal. Isn't it incredible? Do you want a piece?" It's kind of hard to turn that down.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's brilliant to know, and it's great for people to see that that coaching is available because it's so much more powerful coming from someone who's done it in the
Yeah.
way that you have to learn that. So we've talked about the experience. Oh my gosh, that was another thing. I just looking at my notes here, and I'd written down 500 million that
Yeah.
you were raising in 2 years. So and so wrapping it up, we've talked about, you know, you've given some examples, for people to get started. That
Yeah.
was the other thing I wanted to cover off because people sometimes who are not from that world think about high net worth individuals as from a different planet, not quite
Mhm.
human.
Mhm.
Um, did you have that at the beginning when you first started that? Maybe you
Yeah,
didn't, and
no, absolutely. Because I guess you know, it's a bit like getting starstruck if, you know, you see George Clooney on the TV and then in real life, are you going to go and ask George Clooney to give you some money? So, you know, with some of the high profile, high net worth individuals, it can definitely be like that. I guess with the ones who are not high profile, you know, that doesn't really come up because if you didn't know them previously, you know, they could just be anybody. And in all honesty, it doesn't really matter how wealthy you are or not. We're all people. We all, you know, function in the same way. So I try not to let, you know, the fact that somebody is incredibly wealthy, you know, affect how I interact with them or deal with them. And I actually think it works quite well.
yeah. And any tips you would give for people who are finding, because it's all, well, a lot of it's in our mind, but our mind does drive our actions. So, what tips would you give to someone who was starting to sort of move in these circles and wants to be able to build the sort of relationships that might lead to investment?
Mhm. So I think there's a couple of basic things that you need to kind of get your head around and to understand. You should either speak to somebody that has successfully raised money before, or you can go on like a workshop or something like that. So within Propelle Network, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, Steph, we're actually running a two workshops actually on fundraising. So one is on where to find investors and how to work with them and how to make them keep coming back. And then the other workshop is on how to actually prepare that investment document that I spoke about. What do you need to put in it? How do you put the information together? How do you present it in a credible way? So we're going to be running that for both men and women within Propelle Network. So that's one way to do it. You know, as I said, speak to somebody else who is successful at fundraising. I generally feel though that trying to do it on your own without getting guidance from anyone is possible, but you're going to make mistakes. And that's just because you've never done it before. And that likely means that the first people you approach, it may not work. So if you are going to go down that route of just doing it yourself straight away, don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't work out with the first couple of investors. And even if you have help and support and it still doesn't work out with the first couple of investors, keep going. If you remember at the beginning, I said it's about persistence.
Mm.
And not just with the same people, with yourself as well. You have to keep going. And eventually you should see some success.
Those are fantastic tips. And sometimes when I'm on my calls, people say to me, "What is the number one determinant?" Maybe they don't use the word determinant, but
Yep.
what separates the people who are who are successful from the people who aren't in rent to rent? But it's the same thing that separates the people who are successful in any arena, and that is that they keep going. They stay on the field of play until they're scoring the goals. A lot of people make a couple of attempts and then walk off the pitch. So
you've got to be in it to win it, right?
Yeah, you've got to be in it to win it. So fantastic. Thank you so much, Ayesha. We've had a few comments. Michelle saying she loves these podcasts. Thank you, Michelle, for watching. Hello, Steve, who's also watching. And Ayesha, as we wrap things up, are there any how can we get onto these? How can we get onto these workshops? For heaven's sake, I need to ask that question. How do we find book on?
Yeah, it's through Propelle Network, and they're actually available on Eventbrite. So if you look on Eventbrite for the Propelle Network funding courses, they're on there. We're actually running a free workshop. I think it's next Friday. It's either this Friday or next Friday. Apologies, I don't have the date. So we're running a free workshop on fundraising. And then in October, we're running 2 courses. So if you are interested, do join us.
Is it Propelle? What's the web URL, please, for Propelle?
It's propellenetwork.com.
Yes. So I think that could be a good place for people to start and actually go from there and find
if you can't find the courses on there, just register and we'll send you the information.
Yeah, so it's propellenetwork.com. So well worth having a look. Although it's a women's property network, these workshops that Aisha's talking about are for men.
Don't turn men away.
Are for men and women. So sounds indispensable because as Aisha was saying, and we will perhaps all need funds if we're going forward with property. We'll certainly run out of our own. Thank you, Ayesha, for all of the gold you've shared this evening. As we close, is there anything you'd like to leave people with?
Yeah, I would say dream big and keep going. And the reason that I say dream big is because the bigger you dream, you may not hit that goal, but it means that where you likely end up will probably surpass where you even imagined that you could be. So that's what I'll leave you with.
And I just want to say hello, Joan, because see Joan is watching and she's saying she really enjoyed it as well. Thanks, Joan. So thank you, Ayesha. Thank you for watching and for listening. For now, it's goodbye from Ayesha Ofori.
Bye.
And it's goodbye from me. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.